This one was definitely worth the wait, because right here what we have on the table is something that is quite an extraordinary case in terms of cooling, in terms of possibilities when we're talking about fan and radiator support, mounting mechanisms, accessibility, less screwdriver, more thumb screws, more pegs and stuff like that, right? So here we have Montech King 95 Pro in blue color. You also have it in black, white and red, which is kind of cool because it gives you more diversity when we're talking about color scheme in general. And then right here we have the metal DT24 premium 270 watts of TDP air cooler and their new power supply. This is Century G5 850 80 plus gold modular power supply, all packed right here inside this case. And the thing is, with this case, what I wanted to do is I had a different build with these components, and the other motherboards and GPUs were in white. And since I have a blue case, blue and black going throughout, and I really wanted to stick to that color scheme, give you guys, except for some valuable information, I wanted to give you the visual aspect as well, so you know what you can expect while building inside this case. The building procedure inside this case is outstanding, and I really enjoyed the ease of access to all the parts and to mounting everything, literally everything. So everything is on pegs, everything is on thumb screws. Actually, everything that came from the factory, I didn't have to use the screwdriver except for some parts which are in this scenario mandatory, but I'll get to that part later on. So what you get inside the King 95 Pro, you get 6 fans stock. Right, so you have 3 reverse fans, 120 addressable RGB, 120 regular addressable RGB, and you get 2 140 reverse addressable RGB here on the side. And that's quite alright, I would say. It kind of, the Pro version goes quite nicely in terms of if you decide to go with AIO or some sort. You just place it on top and you're good to go, having a complete case filled with fans. But is it? Here's the catch. So you see the fans on the side. They are currently mounted on some sort of a hinge that is held by 2 hinges, right? And you have 2 thumb screws, which are, as I said, from factory quite easy to remove with your hand. You don't need a screwdriver. Then you remove the front fan right here on the bottom, and you just slide that side panel to the front. It gives you an option to place 2 intake fans, 140 or 120, depends on your desire, possibilities and whatever preferences. And on the side you get another possibility to mount 2 more 140. The thing is, when you do that swap, you do have to remove these fans because they're reversed, so you will have exhaust on the front, which in some scenarios isn't alright. So you use these fans, place them on the other bracket at the back, and use 2 140 regular blades to create an intake. This altogether creates a build with 11 fans, 3 on top, 3 on bottom, 2 on the front, 2 on the side and 1 at the rear. Shame this one doesn't have 140 at the back, but it's quite alright. Now, when we take into consideration that this gives you an option to have 11 fans, it comes with a slight consequence, but we'll get to that part when we finish up with the benchmarks. Now, mounting mechanism and all that you have to know, the top pops out just like this. So 4 pegs, I think, yeah, 4 pegs, and then you get the access to the top radiator and fan mounting, which you actually do need to use a screwdriver for 4 screws to remove the top panel and to be able to mount the radiator or the fans, and the fans depends on your configuration, easy outside of the case, and then just pop it back in. That's it. At the back we have of course pegs and thumb screw holding the back side panel, the same configuration that goes on the side tempered glass, and the front tempered glass is only with 2 hinges with top 2 pegs. That's it. That's all that you have. So let's check out the bottom. So 3 120, if you remove them you get additional bracket that you can use to mount your storage, which is outstanding, and the side part that is basically almost touching the back side panel also has a possibility to mount 2 2.5-inch SSDs. Now, since we're at the back, we have a quite interesting part. that whole panel is actually removable with 2 screws, and this is the part that I mentioned that you'll need a screwdriver because they're small screws. You can't actually remove them with your hand or your fingers, and when you remove that, the side panel flips open. You have a possibility to mount 2 140 fans, you have a possibility to mount 2 2.5 inch SSDs, and in addition to that, it hides the cables that are in the middle tied up with Velcro ties because they have a Velcro ties inside. We have a power supply compartment. Underneath you have an opening so you could reroute a couple of cables just to hide them nicely. And you have a hard drive cage here for 2 3.5 inch hard drives, and the backside panel is quite easily removable with a caddy. Here, place it back, place it here, place the backside back, not remove it, but place it back, tie up the thumb screw. That's it. Quite easy, quite straightforward. The interesting part, what I was sort of impressed, is the bottom dust filter. It covers up the whole part, so you don't have to worry about dust coming from the bottom as an intake, and it flips back in quite easy, no problem. The top has a dust filter, the backside has a dust filter, everything is nicely covered, so you don't have to worry about it. Now, when we're discussing the front tempered glass and when you want to swap it with the front mesh one, it doesn't have a dust filter because it would be really a shame to, I don't know, block additional air with that. But it's a fine mesh, and taking everything into consideration, I think that's quite interesting and quite cool. But that's not all. Of course, that's not all. Because this case at the back has a quite nicely placed fan and addressable RGB controller that needs to be connected with 2 SATA power cables running from your power supply. Then you have 2 cables running out of the controller that go to PWM header on your motherboard and addressable RGB header on your motherboard as well. Now, since we can mount up to 11 fans, you'll be missing 1 fan, but with that 1 fan you can most likely either daisy chain it somehow or connect it to your motherboard. It really doesn't matter because you connected already 10 fans to it, 10 addressable RGB headers, and you'll most likely have additional PWM or addressable RGB header free up on your motherboard, which is quite cool. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to connect 10 fans when we're talking about addressable RGB because you have a nice LED strip on the side that is directly connected to that. So you'll have possibility to connect 9 addressable RGB fans. But regardless of that, still kind of eases up the whole process of connecting everything, and you have a quite nice possibility to reroute the cables even with 10 cables, so 20 cables running to that controller. You can really nicely reroute everything. Now, since we're at that point of addressable RGB, you have a button on front when we're talking about IO ports and the power button. You have a possibility to switch through different modes with that button if everything is connected to that controller. If you don't want to use those modes, you can just simply long press that button and it will synchronize to your motherboard, and that's it. So you can either go, for instance, if you don't have addressable RGB on your motherboard, you can simply connect everything to that hub and control the lights through there. That's it. Really cool, really outstanding, and it gives you an option to basically, if you do have addressable RGB header on your motherboard, you want to synchronize the motherboard, graphic card, everything here to that, just simply long press and it will automatically adjust. So the height for the CPU tower cooler is 175 millimeters. The GPU length is fairly long, so 420 millimeters, and the power supply goes up to 190 millimeters, which I think every single component that you can come up with, it can be placed here. They also stated that the case supports ATX, micro ATX, and mini ITX. I have a motherboard right here that is eATX. The only, I would say, downside in terms of eATX motherboard and the possibility of limitations is when you decide to flip that side panel to the front. Just do that before you place the motherboard and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about it, stress about it, or anything similar to that. Just flip that side panel to the front, place the eATX motherboard inside, and you're good to go again. So no limitations inside this case whatsoever. Definitely not with the fans, cooling possibilities, capabilities, and stuff like that. Now let's check out the benchmarks, because I have 3 benchmark tests, benchmark runs, different, in different configurations. So let's start with the stock one. The stock one goes like this. AIDA64 Extreme Edition. CPU went up to 79 degrees with a clock speed 4525 MHz, and GPU went up to 62 degrees. In Cinebench, CPU went up to 89 degrees with a clock speed 4725 MHz throughout all 10 benchmarks, and the Cinebench scores were knocking at 25,000 constantly, so 24,900 and something, really close to 25,000. In mesh scenario, where I placed everything stock as it is, just removed the temper glass and placed the mesh panel, we got 79 degrees on the CPU, clock speed went up a bit by 4550 MHz, and the GPU went up to 63. The only thing that I can see here with the GPU thermal rise is that it doesn't have this curve when we're it does have the curve, the mesh does have the curve, but what happens is this curve with the tempered glass helps the side fans reroute the air to the GPU. When you put the mesh, the air kind of just, it doesn't go out directly, but some parts do. Regardless of that, still okay temperature, nothing to stress about it. Cinebench R23, in that scenario, we have thermals going from 87 to 88 on the CPU, so it is eventually lower, and the clock speeds went up a bit with 4750 to 4775, and the clock speeds went up as well with 25,000, eventually going 150, let's say on average. And then the most interesting part with that insane configuration with 11 fans and the mesh on front, CPU went up to 77 degrees, clock speed went up to 4600 MHz, and the GPU went down with 61 degrees. Cinebench thermals for the CPU 88 degrees, clock speed started at 4725 MHz, and the rest 9 benchmarks were 47 and 50 MHz, while the Cinebench scores were something completely different. So it started at 25,000, then it boosted up to 25,300, eventually touching 25,630, and it went down to stabilize around 25,280-ish. Let's put it this way. When we take into consideration 360 AAO and this cooler, not all air coolers can go in par with 360 AAO, especially those with a thicker radiator, but I think this one held quite alright, specifically when we're talking about AMD Ryzen 9 7900X3D, and I forgot to mention the GPU, so we had RTX 4070 Phoenix GS. I would say, when we take into consideration the possibilities to remove the bottom fans, place 2.5 inch SSDs, the color scheme, the ease of access towards all components, and ease of access when we're talking about removing all the parts, hard drive cages, nice cable management routing without the canals, so just Velcro ties and stuff like that, curved tempered glass. It would be quite interesting to see a full curved tempered glass, but then it would be a bit difficult to mount it inside the case, but that's something completely different and totally irrelevant in this scenario. It does look quite nice when you put the tempered glass on the side, and kind of removes that whole edge part right here. Speaking of edges, since they curved the tempered glass, they also curved the panel right here on the side, where you have one USB Type-C, two USB 3.0, microphone and audio jack, and as I already mentioned, power button and LED button, which is really okay when we're talking about connectivity on the I/O ports. Altogether, quite cool, in addition to the hinge mechanism for the front radiator mounting, and comparing King 95 to King 95 Pro, the Pro version gets 6 fans compared to the King 95 that goes stock without any fans. That's it. The only thing that I can do right now is PC Crazy Creative badge for the hinges, for the tempered glass, for the toolless, let's say, toolless mounting mechanism, loads of dust filters, but that's kind of regular. But the initial part, when we're talking about that, is quite outstanding. So yeah, definitely deserves that badge. This case is lovely. This case is simply lovely. So all in all, you know what comes next. The links for the Montech King 95 Pro and the Metal DT24 Premium 270 watts TDP CPU air cooler, as well as the Century G5 850 watts power supply, are in the description, so you could check that out. And finally, new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, click the notification bell, so you catch up the new videos eventually, and that's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time, guys. Bye bye.